10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, Episode 26. Hey everybody, and welcome back to episode 26 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. My name is Nick Manella. I will be your host. And on this show, if you are new to the program, we try to give a short and concise jazz lesson every single week, complete with downloadable PDFs, which you can find on our website, www.10minutejazzlesson.com. That's the number 10, minutejazzlesson.com. Go and check out the site. You can find a lot of cool stuff there, including all of our past episodes, of which there are 25. You can also find our blog, our resources section, and you can find the store section of our website where we sell some cool ebooks and transcription packs. And you can also find my brand new saxophone book for all of you saxophone players out there. Comprehensive Saxophone Warm-Ups is live and available to you right now. So if you're a saxophone player, head on over to the store and click on the link for Comprehensive Saxophone Warm-Ups. Check that out. I'm really excited about that book, and I think you'll definitely get a lot out of it if you're looking for a better way to warm up. Also, check out our short ebook, Foundational Exercises for the Improviser, and we also have a pack of 4 Lester Young transcriptions for only $5, and all of those things are great ways to support the podcast and throw a few bucks our way every single month to keep the show going. All right, without further ado, let's get into today's lesson. So today I want to talk about vocabulary from a little bit of a different perspective. We all need to learn vocabulary, and in fact, many of our shows have been about vocabulary, including our Lick of the Month series. But today I want to talk about a different approach to vocabulary where you're going to take one piece of vocabulary and we're going to try and manipulate it into a bunch of different ways of playing it. And there's several advantages to this. The first being that in order to take a line and manipulate it and come up with your own ways of playing it, you're really exercising that creative muscle that comes into play when you're improvising. So much of improvising is just, learning stuff through memorization and kind of learning what the masters have played before you. But I think a lot of us, there's a little bit of a disconnect between actually learning vocabulary and then being creative with that vocabulary so that we have a little bit of flexibility and it actually ends up sounding like us and not the person that we ultimately took whatever our vocabulary is from. So this episode is going to be all about getting that creative muscle flexing and building a little bit of that flexibility so that you'll never really be in a situation where you can't play something that makes sense. So I wanted to start by going over a difficulty that I know that I have, and I would imagine that a lot of you have, and that is when you learn a piece of vocabulary and then you find yourself on stage or at a jam session and you're playing over a tune and you want to try to fit that vocabulary that you have been working on into your solo. It's really tough because if you mess up even one note of that piece of vocabulary, you're kind of completely lost. And that particular line that you're trying to play is not going to come out quite right. So the concept that I want to show you today is basically, even if you were to mess up some of that line that you were about to play, you could still recover and complete the line in a number of different ways that will allow you to not sort of trip over your own shoelaces when it comes to improvising. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a 2-5-1 lick that I have been working on this week, and we're going to base the rest of the episode off of this particular lick. So I want you to hear it first, and then I'm going to show you what we're going to do with it. So here's the line. So what we're going to do is first learn that lick. That's the first thing, is you want to take that lick and you want to really get it under your fingers, get it in your brain, like I always say. And then what we're going to do is we're going to concentrate on the dominant chord. So let's take a look at what's happening over the dominant chord. By the time we get to the dominant, what we do, the first note that we're playing is the 13. Then we're jumping up to the root. Then we're coming back down the scale. But then you'll notice that we use the augmented fifth in this particular line. So it's giving us that nice augmented sound, and then it turns into a little bit more of a chordal line at that point. This is the measure that we're going to focus on. What we want to do is we want to develop some flexibility over the second measure of the line so that our solos don't become repetitive and predictable when we want to play something that sounds like this line. So the defining characteristic of the dominant chord is that we have an augmented 5 in it. So let's come up with a couple of different ways that we can manipulate the line so that it has the same basic concept to it, but we have flexibility. We can go in a lot of different directions with it. So the first variation on this line, instead of jumping from the 6 to the root, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from the 6 down to the augmented 5, and then I'm going to complete the line that way. So we're still going to keep that augmented sound, but we're just going to be performing it in a little bit of a different way. So here's example number 2. So you can hear that we change direction, right? Instead of jumping from the 6 up to the 1 and then coming down the scale, we were from the 6 to the augmented 5, and then we went up the chord and we kind of changed the direction of the line. We changed the sound of it a little bit, but we didn't change the essence of the line. We're still playing we're still getting that augmented sound that we want, but this gives us a little bit of flexibility. Say that you've been playing a bunch of 2-5-1 licks and you feel the need to change the shape of the line and go up instead of down. Now, if you're practicing this line, same concept, same everything, but now you have some flexibility. You can go up or down with it. So let's come up with a second variation. This one, we all know that the augmented 5 is part of the whole tone sound. So now what I want to do is, I'm going to keep that augmented 5th, but now I'm going to kind of morph it into a whole tone line. So what I'm going to do now is I'm still going to go to the 6 as the first note, the 13, whatever you want to call it. Then I'm going to jump up to the 9, and I'm simply going to go down the whole tone scale. So that gives me a completely different way of sort of playing the same concept. Notice that in all of these, I'm still starting the line on the 13, and I can always play the same material over the minor chord. So this is giving me a lot of flexibility over the dominant chord, so that I'm not always sounding the same. So this one's going to deal a lot with the whole tone scale, and you'll immediately be able to hear that whole tone sound over the dominant chord. Now, if you're not familiar with the whole tone scale, go back to our catalog of back episodes and check out our series on the whole tone scale, and that'll get it into your ears a little bit better and help you to understand that whole tone scale. So here is variation number 2. So you can hear the heavy whole tone influence on that line. Let's come up with one more. I think one more should do it and get my point across. So in variation number 3, what I'm going to do is I'm going to inject some chromaticism into it. And again, I'm still going to use that augmented 5 because that's the sound that I really want to hold on to. If we get rid of that augmented 5, we really lose our thread of trying to keep the same concept, but coming up with variations on that concept. So this one, again, the dominant measure is going to start on the 13. Then I'm going to go chromatically up to the root, come back down, play the augmented 5, and then I'm going to resolve it in a completely different way by just going 3, 9, and then resolving on the 5 of the major chord. I really like the sound of this one. This is one of my favorite ones that I sort of came up with for this episode. it has a completely different sound, and I think the shape of the line is one of the more interesting ones. So check this one out with a little bit of chromaticism involved. So you hear it still has the augmented sound, as all of our lines have had, but that one changes shape, and that one's the most different out of all of them, I would say. So I think this is a great tool because one of the things that I hear a lot of players doing, especially younger players, is you can tell who they've been transcribing and learning vocabulary from because they basically just regurgitate that exact same vocabulary. So what if we took a line that we learned from one of the jazz masters that we've been transcribing and we put our own creative spin on it? That is really going to help us to develop our own sound. And isn't that ultimately the point of being a jazz musician, is eventually you want to sound like you. It's okay to go through certain stages where you sound like John Coltrane, or you sound like Sonny Rollins, or you sound like Clifford Brown, but ultimately you want to sound like you. And I think this exercise will really start you on your way to developing your own style that's still rooted in the tradition of figuring out what other people are doing. Okay, that's a wrap for today's lesson. I hope you got something out of that. I want to emphasize that I think this is one of the most important things that you can do. We can become robots so easily and just learn without being creative and coming up with our own spin on things. So that does it for this week. We really want to encourage you to go and check out the website. Please visit the store and check out all the cool stuff that we have there. Also, if you have a minute, we still would encourage you to go and leave us a rating and review on iTunes. That really helps us to be visible to more and more people and get more students that are looking for jazz help into the podcast and hopefully help them out. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for all your support. Thanks for listening every week. I really appreciate it. And we will see you next week with a brand new lesson. Thanks.